amazing Rico Bronya podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Bronya. Welcome in, everybody. Episode 627 of the Rico. If you are consuming this in the Northeast or in like 65% of America, good luck with the snow. It has been unbelievable. It is falling at a crazy rate. I've been thinking about it, like, what's the most snow I've ever seen in my life? And I think everybody could play that game. Like, what's the biggest snowstorm you remember? And for whatever reason, when I was living in Maryland in 2003, it feels like I saw 25 inches. It feels like that was the biggest snowstorm I ever saw, well over 2 feet back in 2003. And at the rate that this snow is falling, we may get that. We may clear that. So Hoff and I figured, let's do the Rico Bronya. Let's record this on Sunday before the championship games start and before we all lose power, because you never know when that's going to happen. And we got a lot to talk about. The Mets made a minor major addition, is the way I would define it. We found out through some great reporting of Joel Sherman, the Mets' backup plan, just in case things didn't work out with Bo Bichette and Freddy Peralta from the week that was. And I'm going to read a lot of your emails debating the decision to trade for Freddy Peralta. But let's start off with the minor big news. And by minor, I mean when the Mets sign somebody to a minor league contract or really an invite to spring training, that is minor. Let me refresh you a little bit. Howard Johnson, before his career officially ended, got an invite to spring training and did not make the team. Andres Galarraga, remember Andres Galarraga, Big Cat? He got an invite to spring training. He never made the team. In 2000, Jesse Orosco was reacquired by the Mets, and he was at spring training and never made the team. He was actually traded to St. Louis for Joe McEwing. So there are a lot of examples of veteran players, big-name players, whatever you want to call them, coming to spring training and for whatever reason not making the team and actually never becoming a member of the New York Mets. And a guy who may fit that category is Craig Kimbrel. When Craig Kimbrel signed on Saturday night, I think the reaction from most Met fans was that the initial reaction is, whoa, like Craig Kimbrel. We hated this guy. We keep thinking of not only his dominance with Atlanta, but the way he would lean over the plate. I also think of, I think of Craig Kimbrel and his dominance, and he's had a great career. I think of that game against the Padres back in 2015, the Justin Upton game, where there was a long rain delay. Familia blew it. It was really the epitome of our hell before Yoenis Cespedes walked through that door. I remember Craig Kimbrel got the final few outs for San Diego that day. Like, the hope was, can the Mets rally after the rain delay? And their hopes of rallying was against Craig Kimbrel, who was murder against us for many, many seasons. So he is a big name. He very well could be a Hall of Famer. I mean, there's certainly a debate about his candidacy way down the road. So when you sign a guy like that, I fully understand the wow factor, but we have to remind ourselves it's a minor league invite. Craig Kimbrel can very well be Andres Galarraga, who I am sure most people don't even remember got an invite to spring training for the New York Mets 20 plus years ago. So there's no reason to be upset. There's no reason for this to be like a bad thing. If Craig Kimbrel goes to Port St. Lucie and pitches well, he's got a chance to make the team. Now, I was looking back at what he did last year because you almost forgot he pitched last year. He barely did. Atlanta brought him back, and he pitched in one game for the Atlanta Braves, and that was it. Ended up in the minor leagues, got DFA'd, was picked up, I think, by San Francisco, got DFA'd, and he actually finished the season in Houston, where he pitched reasonably well for the Astros. Like, he didn't pitch a lot in 2025, but he wasn't bad. And I go back a year earlier to his time in Baltimore. It was a very odd season for Kimbrel, to where I think he should have the David Robertson plan of basically pitching half a season. Because in 2024 with the Orioles, he was actually really good for the first three and a half months of the season, and then fell off the cliff at the very end of the year. It would not surprise me one bit if Craig Kimbrel made this team. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if Craig Kimbrel pitched well for this team for a period of time. I think what would overall surprise me is if Craig Kimbrel pitched a complete season well for this team. Real quick, just to give you perspective on what happened with the Orioles in 2024, his last full season in the major leagues. In the first half of the year, he made 39 appearances through 35 innings, struck out 53 guys, had a whip under 1, struck out 13.5 per 9, and pitched to a 2.80 ERA and saved 23 games. That's in the first half of the season. In the second half of the season, he pitched 17 innings. He walked 15 guys. He gave up 22 runs and pitched to a 10.59 ERA. If you want to take it month by month, in March, April, 3.18. In May, 2.79. In June, 0.96. July, 6.52. August, 7.27. And then finally in September, 22.09. So it was a cliff job for Craig Kimbrel in 2024, which is why I say if he could get it, he should probably take the David Robertson plan of pitch half a season. That's probably what he should do. But look, in this case, no harm, no foul. I look at this Met bullpen, and let's break it down real quick, the certainties and the non-certainties. Barring injury, and obviously injuries can play a huge part of spring training in reshaping this roster, the Mets have 4 guys who should be, if healthy, on the opening day roster. Devin Williams, A.J. Minter, Brooks Raley, and Luke Weaver. I think it is fair to put A.J. Minter in a little bit of a box and wonder if he's going to be ready for the start of the season. He missed a bulk of last year, came off major surgery. The Mets could very well take it very slow with A.J. Minter. So it could be 3 guys who are sure thing to make this bullpen. Luis Garcia, who they just signed, I would also put as a sure thing to make the bullpen. So I'd kind of put a 5th guy on that list. And I'd almost say it's 4.5 because of the possibility that Minter starts the year on the IL. Now, I know what you're saying. You may be saying, but Ev, what about Tobias Myers, who they just acquired in this Freddy Peralta trade, who we'll spend a little bit more time talking about? They have options on Myers. So while I think it's very likely he makes the team, it's not a certainty. In fact, he didn't make the Brewers last year. They played a little bit of a numbers game with him. So I would say it's likely he makes the team, especially with the way he pitched out of the bullpen in the second half of the year. But I always leave the possibility open when somebody has options that they may not. And then you've got Huascar Brazoban, who, again, I think a lot of people would say he's not a lock, but a near certainty to make the team. But same thing as Myers, he has options. It is entirely possible to protect someone who doesn't have options, who may not accept an invitation to go down to AAA. Kimbrel is probably a pretty good example of this. He'd have a leg up. Like if Huascar Brazoban pitches well and Craig Kimbrel pitches well, and the Mets, when we break down the roster structure, only has room for one guy, Kimbrel's going to have the edge because he's probably not accepting going down to AAA, while Huascar Brazoban doesn't have a choice. The other guys I'll throw at you, Alex Carrillo, who has options. Reed Garrett's going to go on the IL. Joey Gerber, Justin Hagenman, McGill and Nunez will go on the IL. Jonathan Pintaro, Austin Warren, and then Dylan Ross. I think Dylan Ross has a real chance to make this team, but he too has options. So when you hear the names and the guys who are competing, and by the way, there are a few other guys too. Carl Edwards Jr. has a chance to make this team. Adbert Alzolay, who we talked about last year, they picked him up off of a major injury, so he didn't pitch a year ago. He's got a chance to make this team. And then what we have to keep in mind, and I talked a little bit about this on the last Rico, is at least my idea of keeping the 6 starters, assuming they're all healthy, and possibly doing a little bit of a tag team effort where it's not a straight 6-man rotation, but it's 2 guys, preferably Minaya and Senga, maybe tag teaming on starts until they prove they could actually be a full functioning major league starter that goes more than 5 innings. That shouldn't change the roster very much. Like if they're carrying a 6-man rotation versus that plan of a 5-man rotation, it's still 6 guys. So it still leaves you 1 arm short from what you are legally allowed to carry. Remember, the max amount of pitchers you can carry are 13. So if you have a 6-man rotation, it's 7 bullpen arms. If it's a 5-man rotation, you've got the 8. Either way, no issue signing Craig Kimbrel. He's a nice veteran to throw out there, and we'll see if he can earn the job in spring training. I don't like Craig Kimbrel, I never did, but hey, listen. Baseball makes strange bedfellows, right? I mean, this this whole season's going to feel like that. We got a lot of new guys on this roster, a lot of guys that maybe we don't have a dislike for, but certainly guys that we don't have a love for. Go out, perform, we'll fall in love with you. And speaking of this offseason, we'll spend a lot more time on the Peralta trade. I pulled a crap load of your emails that we'll read and we'll discuss. Joel Sherman did some great reporting on really how this offseason came about and their backup plans, also what led to some of these things happening. I'll read a few of it, some of it for you, and give you some of my thoughts. Like, for example, Joel Sherman writes, it was not the offseason plotted, but also not the last gap they were planning had they not landed Bo Bichette and Freddy Peralta late, in which case they were going to emphasize trading with St. Louis for Brendan Donovan to play left field and trying to sign Chris Bassett or Zach Gallen to deepen the rotation. That is not great, by the way. I mean, that's got to make you feel good that they pulled this off with Bo Bichette and Freddy Peralta, despite my concerns about what they gave up. Because under that backup plan he just talked about, hey, I don't know what they're giving up for Brendan Donovan. I have no idea. And Brendan Donovan is a good, versatile player, don't get me wrong. But it would have felt like this lineup was missing something. Bo Bichette gives you that, a little bit of the fear factor. He gives you the star potential. And really, his career has shown he's a star offensive player, so it's more than just potential. Brendan Donovan's a good, useful player. You could put him anywhere. But I think the lineup would feel like it was missing something if they didn't make the pivot and then the success of signing Bo Bichette. The lineup would not feel as fearsome as it feels today. And as far as the rotation is concerned, Zach Gallen would have cost you the draft pick because he is a qualifying offer free agent, which is same as Bo Bichette. It's almost as if they were willing to sign one guy who was a QO free agent. And Bo Bichette, even though it's only a one-year deal, feels to me more worth it than a guy like Zach Gallen or even a guy like Framber Valdez. And Chris Bassett, I thought for a second they got him back as my dad texted me the other day and says it sounds like the Mets got Chris Bassett. And I'm not sure if it was a Francesa situation where he was reading an old report, like when they traded for him a few years ago, or if it was the attached rumor of bringing Chris Bassett in. And I don't have an issue with Chris Bassett, don't get me wrong, but he isn't the top of the rotation or near the top of the rotation horse that Freddy Peralta is. If they didn't get Peralta and Bichette, and instead we were talking about Brendan Donovan in a trade, and again, no idea what they give up, but it possibly may be too much. You know, you never know what that price tag is. And then we're talking about Gallen and Bassett, wouldn't feel good. What else did I pull from this Joel Sherman article? Oh, this one. Not surprised by. Oh, go ahead, Hoff.
Yeah, I have a question because this is all good for like, okay, good. This plan was better than the plan B. But was that the plan A? Do they have anything in there like what the actual plan was for this offseason? What the goal was, what they wanted to do?
Maybe this will help out. This is their thoughts on Pete Alonso. They also internally thought Alonso would not get a 5-year deal and that maybe with a 3 or potentially 4-year offer, they would retain the Polar Bear, especially because they had already found him amenable to their vision of using him as a DH to 5 out every 7 games. So basically, not that that was their plan A, but, and I had heard that too, that they were surprised that he got 5 years, that they thought that it would end up similar, not the same, but similar to a year ago, where Pete would go out, he'd demand all these crazy things, nobody would give it to him, and then he comes home to daddy. That was, I don't know if that's plan A, though. I mean, I don't know what their plan A was, because if their plan A was always short-term deals, that's never going to happen quickly. Like, you're always going to have to wait for guys to assess the market the way Bo Bichette did, the way Pete Alonso would have to have had, and then you end up with the players. So if the plan was short-term all the way around, which is what it seems, then I think plan A wasn't specific players more than it was get really good players on short-term deals.
Just
so
think
they misread the Alonso market is the bottom line. Somebody offered him 5 years. They did not think that.
Think this way. Say if it was a perfect world and no one ever offered Pete Alonso 5 years and they didn't screw up the Edwin Diaz thing. If you added those two pieces to this roster that they have right now, that to me would get me uber excited. Like we could take down any team It doesn't make a difference. The Dodgers, the Yankees, you name it. That is a stacked team.
Yeah, but I
That's
don't think Bichette was ever going to be with Pete Alonso. I doubt they were going to offer Bo Bichette $42 million a year on a short-term deal after re-signing Alonso. I think it would have been Alonso or Bichette. I don't even know about Polanco. Sure, the Simeon thing obviously did happen, and I think the Luis Robert Jr. thing would have happened, and absolutely the Freddy Peralta thing. I don't think that's connected at all. So I wouldn't imagine Bichette and Alonso together was ever a realistic scenario.
Yeah, see, that's where I disagree. I go, if you want to be the Dodgers, if you want to compete with the Dodgers, you have to have that as a realistic part of your scenario, especially if it's just a short-term deal. But that's neither here nor there.
How about this part of the Joel Sherman article? This is worth digesting. The Rangers felt the relationship between Marcus Semien and Corey Seager had become so toxic that they were willing to take Nimmo and $5 million from the Mets to move the 3 years of 72 owed to Marcus Semien. The Mets were ecstatic because at minimum, Semien fit a hunger to be sounder defensively up the middle. Plus, with a 10-team no-trade clause and fewer years owed, they felt Semien could be traded again if that need arose. But the big deal was the future. The Mets worried about having Nimmo and Soto in the corners for a long period, both perhaps having to DH and deteriorating more defensively over the next 5 years. Obviously, that last part we knew, that the Mets viewed Brandon Nimmo at his age with 5 years left on the deal, with the fact that he has been banged up the last couple of years and has gotten worse defensively, that would be a concern moving forward of Nimmo and Soto on the corners. And look, before they traded Brandon Nimmo, I was certainly suggesting that Nimmo had to DH more. So I guess I and many others were on the same page as the Mets in terms of worry on Brandon Nimmo. But we hear so much about the Met room. We hear so much about the relationships in the Met locker room. Here is your first report, at least that I've read, that Marcus Semien was traded in part because of a bad relationship he had with Corey Seager. And look, Simeon's got a great reputation. Newest Met Bo Bichette was emotional talking about Marcus Semien when he left Toronto to go to Texas. So he's got a great reputation. I'm not worried about him necessarily, but I find it interesting. I was like, oh, I didn't see that one coming, that Marcus Semien and Corey Seager had a, quote, toxic relationship. What do you make of that?
All right, so here's the thing, right? Like, we look at Lindor and Semien. I think those two guys go hand in hand very well because they're guys that want to spot every day, right? Like, that's the term that we've heard it. They want to spot every day. That's playing every single game. And if you look at McNeil, not saying McNeil didn't want to spot every game, but McNeil played sloppy baseball, did not play the defense that Lindor, not up to the standards that Lindor had, right? When you look at Seager, he just didn't play a lot.
You think that's what it was about? If we're playing the guessing game of why did they not like each other?
Dude, you want to be out there every day. I need my guy. What are you doing? Yeah, like listen, Corey Seager, no matter what you want to say offensively, one of the most skilled batters in the league. I mean, that guy put up, I think one year, only batted like 116 games, whatever it was, and put up numbers that would be like career years for players. So he's a fantastic batter. You're letting us down. You're not here. I think that bothers some players.
So you think it was about that? You don't think they were arguing about politics too?
Well, they're all in Texas. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know.
I'm just joking. I think that it's funny because we spend so much time worrying about this room. And even now, there is an assumption made by many people, including many people listening or watching right now, that the reason the Mets did all of this was because of the locker room. And I'm not fully convinced of it. Like, the reporting of Joel Sherman, who I trust, and our logic, like our eye test, tells us that their decisions to move on specifically from Nimmo and Alonso, because I put Diaz in a corner, I think they screwed that up. And I think the Mets, again, I've said this many times, if they get a truth serum test, they'd admit they screwed that up. They screwed up the negotiations.
Right.
But in the case of Brandon Nimmo, it was what we just said, the deteriorating abilities that he has at his age. It wasn't the locker room. Same thing with Pete. It was always, we don't want to give him a 5-year contract. We expect that no one's going to give that to him, and we'll go get him. So it's an accepted position that David Stearns had to blow it up because the locker room was toxic. And I still don't fully believe it based on not just the reporting of Joel Sherman in the cases of those players, but also we knew they felt this way about Pete for multiple years. We know. Now, I think that changing the locker room was like an added benefit because, yes, when you have failures in honestly 4 out of the last 5 seasons, which I think is the case, even though they won over 100 games in 2022, I think the way the season ended was so negative that you could very well look at that season as a failure. You win over 100 games, you lead the division most of the season, you don't win the division when it's right in front of you, and then you get a quick exodus in the first round of the playoffs, a newly created first round of the playoffs. Like, it is absolutely fair to call that kind of season a failure. That is more than just, hey, it's a crapshoot come playoff time, which I accept when you win your division and you lose a best of 5. I will accept that as, hey, that's a crapshoot. What I won't accept as a crapshoot is when you lead your division the entire year, all you need to do in Atlanta is win 1 game. You don't win any, you lose the division, and then you lose in this newly created best of 3 in which every game's at home. Like, that to me doesn't qualify in the, it's a crapshoot. You can't go too serious about it. So they've had a lot of failures the last few years, even before Stearns got here. And I think the added benefit was, you know what? Let's try something different. But I do think it really corresponds to the deteriorating skills of Brandon Nimmo. Can we trade him, which they did, first move they made of this offseason. And then, hey, we're never willing to give Pete 5 years. We were never willing to give Pete 5 years. Somebody gave it to him. Good luck and congratulations. And I think that defines it more than a need to kill the locker room.
No, and I will say this much. I think David Stearns, not saying it was like a Brian Daboll and Joe Shane first year with the Giants when they got into the playoffs and it's like, all right, I guess we kind of have to run this back. It's hard to rip a team down and build your team after 1 year of success where they go to the NLCS. So last year, I'm not saying he was happy that it ended badly, but it more justified what he did. And I'll give David Stearns this, and I think I've said this to you before. I hate it because I'm a Pete Alonso guy. I'm an Edwin Diaz guy, all that stuff. That being said, how many GMs or presidents get to actually see the fruit of their team? Like, I want to build my team. He did it. In one offseason, he built David Stearns' team. This is not in 5 years it'll be there because I might be fired in 4. I'll never actually build my team. He did it in one offseason. So for that, I give him credit.
Look at that. First time Hoff's ever given David Stearns credit. Congratulations.
You're welcome, Dave.
Let's read your emails. Let's go in depth on this Freddy Peralta trade. If you go back 2 episodes, I think it was 625 or 626. I forget now. We reacted to the trade. And my initial reaction is not to dislike the trade. I don't dislike the trade. I think the word I'd use, I was trepidatious or whatever that word is. I had some trepidation about the trade considering what they gave up. They gave up an awful lot. 2 top 100 prospects for a pitcher who's really solid and a pitcher who's a free agent at the end of the season. And I would surmise, until proven otherwise, someone that they are not going to lock up long term. Oh, one other thing, though, about Sherman's reporting that does relate to this. He did mention as one of the backup plans was that they may have gone the 5 years for Ranger Suarez. Now, I don't count that as there's David Stearns making his 3rd long-term offer to a player because I don't think that offer was ever made. But Sherman reports that there would have been a willingness to go to 5 years with Ranger Suarez. And the reason that is notable is one of the reasons I assume that Freddy Peralta is not going to sign an extension before opening day and that the Mets are not going to aggressively sign him as a free agent is because we don't have a track record of him doing it. Can I be wrong? Sure. Like, all track records eventually end. What I am curious about, because I am partially giving you my opinion while also figuring him out along the way, like playing the game of what is this team president thinking? Well, in playing the game, I am thinking that he's not going to give Freddy Peralta at 30 years old in free agency a 5-year deal because there is no track record of him doing that. Suarez, though, in that report by Sherman is at least interesting because it's the first indication that there was a willingness to go long-term with a starting pitcher other than Yamamoto, who they made the offer on and obviously did not get him. Let's go to your emails. There were literally hundreds of them, so I do apologize if we're not getting to yours. I printed out a lot of them. That's right. I'm old school. I print them out and I read them that way. But we do appreciate you interacting. The ricob@gmail.com. Let me start off with Keith. Keith writes, Evan, you've been asking what makes the Freddy Peralta trade worth it, when giving up 2 top 100 prospects? And I'm curious what you think of my answer. For me, it's not a playoff or an extension mandate. It's a developmental mandate. For this trade to be worth it, the Mets have to continue to develop top 100 prospects and maintain their status as one of the best farm systems in baseball. Stearns must also be able to know our prospects better than anyone outside the organization and figure out which ones to trade and which ones to keep. With that said, you also want the players you trade to have some success because you don't want to develop a reputation where no one wants to trade with you. If they're able to maintain a top farm system where you can replace the prospects they trade, then in my opinion, any trade is worth trying. Thanks for all the work you and the Hoff do. Love the Rico. That's interesting. That's an interesting analysis on it, that as opposed to if Freddy Peralta truly is a rental, they have to get to a World Series or they have to win a World Series or whatever your need is when you're trading for rental. I haven't thought of that, which is I need the Met farm system to just continue to be loaded. For Jonah Tong to come up in the second half of the year and be great. For some of the other pitching prospects to continue to shoot up prospect lists. So even if Sproat turns into something big, I don't feel as bad because I continue to be loaded. Interesting. JP writes, Evan, on the surface, it doesn't seem like the Mets would consider extending Freddy Peralta. He's in his 30s, and Stearns isn't usually apt to give out long-term contracts to pitchers. But here's why I think this situation is different. The value proposition of extending Freddy Peralta is much better than signing a free agent next offseason. Right now, there's no competition to extend him. A year from now, 29 other teams could be in the mix. Stearns is smart enough to see this. Last year, Garrett Crochet was extended for 6 years, $170, and Dylan Cease just signed for 7 years, $210 on the open market. Another point is, I don't think you need to give Peralta a super long deal. Usually when a big-time free agent hits the open market, it takes an extra year or two added to the deal to get them to sign. I think a 5-year extension is absolutely possible. It's not the short-term deal that Stearns prefers to give, but it's not crazy long either, and the AAV would likely be smaller as well. The thing is, this big thing, too, is the fact that Peralta seems to want an extension. What do you think? Well, keep in mind with Garrett Crochet, he was not as close to free agency as Peralta was. And I have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure Crochet was 2 years away from free agency. And that extra year is a big deal. Number two, you're right. I do think that Peralta is showing, at least the reports that came out after the trade, an openness to an extension. But because you're open to an extension doesn't mean you're open to a discount. And what you're describing is Freddy Peralta, even though he is this close to free agency. And I don't think the lockout is that big of a threat because he'll be a free agent for that 1 month free agent run prior to the lockout. And I think Peralta, especially if he comes off a big year, will be hot enough where teams will go sign him anyway. We saw free agents sign before the previous lockout. I don't know if Peralta is going to be willing to take the kind of team-friendly contract that you're describing, especially considering his contract with Milwaukee is incredibly team-friendly. To put that in perspective, Freddy Peralta, when you look at salaries in this Met rotation, is ranked 5th. Sean Manaea makes $25 million. Kodai Senga makes $15 million. Clay Holmes makes $13 million. Even David Peterson is scheduled to make $8.1 million, slightly above Freddy Peralta. So Freddie's looking around. Here's the best part. The two best pitchers in the Met rotation going into the start of the year, I think we'd all agree, are Freddy Peralta and Nolan McLean, the two guys making the fewest dollars for now. Because I'll tell you something else, along with will they extend Freddy Peralta or not? And I've talked about this briefly before. If the Mets are going to be hesitant to give out long-term contracts, even though they're a big market team and they're willing to spend huge AAVs, I'd be aggressive keeping my young players now. I'd be aggressive in trying to sign guys like Nolan McLean to contracts that buy out multiple years of free agency. Why not? Why not? Now, there's risks attached to it, clearly, but there's also the ultimate reward. Early on in the Reyes and Wright era, they did that to them, which is why David Wright and Jose Reyes were making very little amount of monies before they got to free agency. In the case of Reyes, he got to free agency. He obviously left, we all know. And in David's case, signed an extension a year before free agency. Richard writes, first the facts. The trade was for 2 players, not 1. And that detail matters. And the second piece is a 26-year-old who's had success at the major league level. Also, the rental is for a full-year rental, not a midseason acquisition, for a front-of-the-rotation starter, an undisputed number one starter. The fact that the starter only makes $8 million is an extra plus. Freddy Peralta has said he's open to signing an extension, so I don't think you can say Stearns will absolutely not offer an extension. You are being negative, Evan, even if you say you aren't. On the Fan, quote, again, I'll ask you the question about the roadblock. First, the caller was saying second base, not center field. Benj is considered ahead of Jet for center field. Jet Williams batted .209 at AAA. Why are you surmising that Luis Robert will hit 160? He had a career low of .223. His floor is 30 stolen bases, 15 home runs, effectiveness against lefties, and great defense, while he himself was a top 10 prospect. You're fighting tooth and nail to defend your opinion and are failing badly. Jet may become a good major leaguer, maybe even a great player. If you were a GM and you only looked at the ceiling of the player, you would never make a trade. You can't think every trade will have the same result as trading a Nolan Ryan, Amos Otis, or Pete Carl Armstrong. Good job going through multiple generations with that. A full year of a number one starter is not going to come without giving up top prospects. If you're going to fight this, then suggest a realistic option of how the Mets could have acquired a number one pitcher and what that cost would have been. Again, why can't you just be happy? Well, couple of things. I want to go back to the Robert thing. I'll try to fight all of your points because they're all fair and they're all good criticisms of things I've said. So just to reset, what I said on the air is a guy called in and said Jet Williams was going to be roadblocked, like he wasn't going to get a chance to play. I mapped out a scenario where he would get a chance to play, and that was if Luis Robert Jr. was hitting 160 in May. His response is, how could you say that? He's a 230 hitter. Why would you say 160? Well, what you left out is I brought up his box scores from last year, and that in May, Luis Robert Jr. was hitting 160. And my question to Tiki, and it would be to everybody listening right now, is if that happened again, and we are sitting here in the middle of May, and Luis Robert Jr. is hitting 165, he's not guaranteed to continue to play every day. I don't care how much money he's making. And you know that. Every single person knows that. If he's hitting 160 in May, we would Cedric Mullins his ass. And if Jet Williams was performing in AAA and Carson Benj was already here, there is a scenario I just laid out. Not that I'm hoping for it, not that I'm predicting it. I'm just using a reference point from last year with Robert Jr. to say, here, there's an example of where Jet Williams would not be roadblocked. The outfield is a spot in which he may not be roadblocked. Because A, like I said with Robert Jr., he needs to perform to maintain that center field job. He's going to get it right away. He should have it right away. I think he's going to actually have a bounce back year. It's not about predictions. It's about if he does what he did last year and he's hitting 160 in May, you know we're talking on the Rico and on WFAN every day about benching him. And he would be benched. This is not Chicago anymore. The expectations are higher. So that was the scenario I was laying out in terms of where he could get a chance to play. Now, if I'm saying they gave up too much, give me a realistic scenario where they were getting a top-line starter without giving up that much. Well, obviously, I don't have that answer because Freddy Peralta was essentially, unless you want to consider one of the free agents like Dylan Cease or Framber Valdez, who's still out there, a frontline starter, he was the only one traded. But I think I know my issue. See, I want to self-diagnose. We have audio, and this is not from the Rico. I think this is actually from Evan and Tiki. I'm surprised. I figured I would have said this on the Rico Bronya, in which I put together a hypothetical trade for Freddy Peralta. Now, if you forgot, I also put a hypothetical trade together for Tarek Skubal that was widely ridiculed as way too expensive. The deal, if you forgot, was two major leaguers, David Peterson and Francisco Alvarez, and two minor leaguers, either Brandon Sproat or Jonah Tong, Sproat's gone, or Jet Williams or Carson Benj. Jet Williams is already gone. So more expensive than the Peralta trade, but not considerably. Yes, two major leaguers, two potentially good ones, especially Alvarez. Peterson only has 1 year left of control, so I wouldn't put it that high. And that was my realistic offer for Tarek Skubal, which was widely criticized as too expensive. Well, I'm about to play you what I thought And I'm laughing because it was so off. What I thought was going to be the offer for Freddy Peralta. And keep in mind, the reason I thought this was I saw what Corbin Burns was traded for, and Freddy Peralta, with all due respect, and I'm excited he's a Met, not as established as Burns when he was traded, and not nearly as good as Tarek Skubal. So here is the trade that I thought we'd get it done for Freddy Peralta. And if you wonder why I'm laughing, here's why I'm laughing.
I think the deal I'd probably make, especially if I try to compare it to Corbin Burns, is McNeil and Mauricio and a lower level prospect for Freddy Peralta. But
so maybe, ladies and gentlemen, that's why I don't love this trade. Because in my warped brain, I thought the deal that would get done would be Jeff McNeil, who was traded for a teenager, Ronnie Mauricio, who, look, they haven't traded him, so I don't know what his trade value would be, and then a, quote, lower level prospect. That's what I thought, based on what Corbin Burns cost, would be the price for Freddy Peralta. And so maybe my issue is, if that's what I thought the price was, and I was wrong about it, that's why Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat feel that expensive. You would have made that trade, right, Hoff? That would have been a no-brainer for you? Ronnie Mauricio, Jeff McNeil, and a low-level prospect?
And listen, I love Mauricio, but yeah, that's a no-doubter. Listen, and I have to clarify something that I said during the week when I saw the Mackenzie Gore trade. A lot of people were upset about the reason why I said Mackenzie Gore. And if you look at Freddy Peralta is 31 years old, and
he's not 31 years yet. He's 29. He's going to be 30 in the middle of the summer. So
okay,
let's pipe down about his age. You just aged the poor guy 2 years.
So sorry, I pulled a BT. BT used to age Pete Alonso every single year. He's 30 years old. He's 30 years old. And he didn't even turn 30 yet, but he was 30 years old. I mean, every time. That being said, he's going to be 30 years old some point in time this year. I don't know. Like we know that the issues that Stearns has with signing somebody for a long-term deal. The reason why I was excited about Mackenzie Gore is, first of all, the 5 guys that they traded away, I'm sorry, one was a first-round pick from this past year. That guy's never going to see the light of day for 5 years. Not like you know what I'm saying? Like, so I know it was heavy because it was 5 guys, but you're getting 2 years of control out of Mackenzie Gore. Plus, I know his second half was not great. His first half was dynamite, and it was his first year pitching that way deep into a season. Like, he pitched a lot of innings for Mackenzie Gore, and he's only going to be, I think, 27. He's 26 right now. He's going to be 27 come the season starts. So It's like, and something that I always listen to you about. You talk about how lefties develop a little bit later on.
Yeah.
If he's going to be 27 and pitching like he was the first half of the season, I'd be excited. I'd take a risk on someone like that because he can be turning into an ace.
I can't prove this, but I don't think the Nationals were ever trading Mackenzie Gore to the New York Mets. I just don't. And Mike Rizzo isn't there anymore. And Mike Rizzo was the one who was very open. Like, yeah, I'm not trading inside the division. And I remember when they traded Scherzer and they traded Trey Turner. And we were like, oh, what about us? What about us? They were never trading him inside the division. I think that the Nationals wouldn't have done that personally. And also, I'd have to try to figure out what is a 5-man equivalent. And probably plus, because again, it's inside your division. So even if I'm wrong, they were willing to do it. It was always going to take more then. You put a tax on a team inside your division where you have to face that guy for the next multiple years. I think it would have been very, very expensive. And the thing about Mackenzie Gore is I like him. He takes the ball every 5 days, and he is a lefty, and the best is yet to come. I would certainly agree with that. I think in the shortest of terms, and this contradicts the whole, hey, we're thinking big picture, but in the shortest of terms, I would feel more confident about Freddy Peralta on a 1-year deal than I would the next 3 years of Mackenzie Gore. But I just don't know how realistic it was because of it being inside the division.
Two quick points.
He was moved. He was moved for a lot, that's for sure.
2 quick points. First of all, Juan Soto is the gift that keeps giving, because think about that. Juan Soto was traded to San Diego. Mackenzie Gore was in that trade back to
it's amazing.
Nationals. And now they get 5 pieces for Mackenzie Gore. I mean, it just keeps on trickling down. Plus, your Garrett Crochet, you were correct. He would be going into arbitration 3 in 2026, but they signed him to the extension.
Yeah.
So the extension actually kicks in next year, the 6-year deal.
Let's not forget. Let's remember this about Garrett Crochet. The year he had in Chicago was his first real year as a starter, and they babied the crap out of him. So here was a guy signing an extension off of never really proving he's a full-time starting pitcher. But he also had 2 years left before getting to free agency. So if you're Garrett Crochet and you're offered a really big contract, maybe not as much as you could make once you're established, that's a great deal for someone who's never proven he's a full-time starter, like a real full-time starter, and 2 years away from free agency where crazy stuff can happen. So I don't think it's the same as the situation with Freddy Peralta. Let's read this from Scott. Scott in Boulder, Colorado writes, flashback just 2 years ago to the Mets 2024 preseason prospect rankings on Baseball Prospectus. And the top 3 names are Jet Williams, 5'7" on his toes, Drew Gilbert, 5'8", and Luis Angel Acuna, 5'8". All 3 were acquired before David Stearns showed up, and all 3 are now gone. As a 5'7" man himself, I love rooting for one of the short guys and rejoicing in the successes of Jose Altuve and David Eckstein, or the one and only Muggsy Bogues in basketball. However, the numbers are the numbers, and a guy 6'3" or more is likely to be an impact player, and Stearns knows that as much as you and I do. So not necessarily a bias, just the GM crunching the stats and saying, I'll take my chances with Ryan Clifford and Ronnie Mauricio and Jacob Reimer. Do you think that Stearns deliberately traded away our shorter overachievers while they still had prospect value, but also to remove them from the system? I ask you this because if you look at the 40-man roster, 0 pitchers are under 6 foot, and the only 5 position players, they're all 5'10" and up. Well, Freddy Peralta is not huge. He's not 5'7" or 5'8". I think Freddie's listed at 6 foot, but I would not describe Freddy Peralta as a big hulking pitcher. So I get the point, but the guy they just acquired isn't exactly, he's not Mackenzie Gore when it comes to his height. There could be something to that. Tiki's pointed that out a lot. He doesn't trust short players, which is ironic considering Tiki was not exactly a behemoth. He's a short guy himself. But there could absolutely be something to that. We all love the successful short player, but there aren't a million examples. You're right. This is from Matt. Matt writes, you and others on WFN have pointed out the risk in trading for Peralta given David Stearns' reluctance to offer pitchers long-term deals. I agree that's a valid concern. That said, Stearns may not be the one making those calls next year. If the Mets underperform in 2025, there's a realistic chance he's let go. So I think it's premature to anchor the risk assessment solely to his historical tendencies. Curious to hear your take. Matt, with all due respect, you couldn't be more wrong. David Stearns is safe. As much as some, maybe not as many today, with the way the offseason is pivoted, as much as some want to say, if they have a bad year, Stearns is not getting fired. I think David Stearns is going to have an incredibly long leash here because Steve Cohen waited for this man. He waited. We sat through basically interim general managers while he waited to get his man. I think it would take years of failures, fundamental failures, for Steve Cohen to say, all right, I'm starting over. He is nowhere near the hot seat. If I was ranking all the executives and the hotness of each seat, I would actually tell you that David Stearns has the coldest of any seat. I would even go crazy to tell you Leon Rose has a hotter seat than David Stearns, only because you never know with James Dolan. I think with Steve Cohen, this is his guy. So I completely disagree with you. I think that every move should be made through the prism of what will David Stearns do, because he's going to be the one deciding. This is another Matt. Matt writes, love the podcast. I listen to every episode twice. Wow. Once in audio and once on YouTube. I like that. Well, for those on the YouTube audience, we have a new background. We finally decorated the background. We have baseballs that spell out the word Rico, but we're a few baseball handlers short. So the I is incomplete and the R is incomplete. I will move my head for the YouTube audience, and you will see that it actually says Pico. But we're going to get that ball set and make it a full R. So we got a nice little background. I may have to play around with the camera a little bit, but hey, it's the offseason. We're working our way towards spring training. But we do appreciate you watching on YouTube or downloading the podcast wherever you download the podcast. I don't know why you would listen twice, but it's greatly appreciated. I think Hoff gets bonuses based on YouTube views and podcast downloads. So he's very, very, very happy. Anyhow, I love your trade comparisons. My question is this. If Peralta cost Jet and Sproat, how much more would have gotten Skubal? Was it astronomical? Tong and Vientos? Thanks for the continued episodes. So we now know what the Tigers have asked for, and I heard that earlier on during the offseason. I think I mentioned it here on the Rico that their ask to the Mets, the Yankees, and everybody else was so high that teams assumed they were not serious about trading Tarek Skubal. Their ask for the Mets was Nolan McLean plus. Their ask for the Yankees was Cam Schlittler, Ben Rice plus. And I know one could try to argue, hey, it's Tarek Skubal, it's worth it. For a guy with 1 year left on his deal, it is not a trade that teams are going to make. And it felt as if it was an unserious, yeah, we'll ask, but we're really not serious about trading him. The Mets are not trading Nolan McLean. The New York Yankees are not trading Cam Schlittler. It's not realistic. So when you ask, okay, well, what is the realistic package? I don't think there is one until the Tigers decide they want to trade him. And they have not done that yet. Can the Mets still trade for Tarek Skubal? I think they can. Their farm system is deep enough. The question is, would they be willing? Would they be willing to trade? They've just traded 2 top 100 prospects. Now, they've got 6 in total. Would they be willing to trade 3 or 4 more top 100 prospects for another guy who is potentially a rental? That's a lot. I think if the Mets are sitting there in July and they're in first place in the NL East, or they're right there in the NL East, I think that maybe then the temptation of winning will be so close and so right in front of them, and maybe the price tag won't be as astronomical because it's only a few months, that they would be willing to do it. But as of right now, I'd be very surprised if Skubal is traded before opening day. Brandon from Connecticut writes, Evan, I was surprised by your trepidation towards the Peralta trade because of what Jet Williams may become. Even if the Mets make no effort to extend or sign Peralta beyond 2026, this is an excellent deal. Just like with Acuna, there's no room for Jet Williams on this team unless both Tyrone Taylor and Carson Bench are either injured or abysmal. What are we saving him for? A potential future in which he might be useful and hopefully will be good? Hesitating to trade a prospect when a cheap ace is available is about as close to replacing strategy with sheer hope as one can get. Let's take some time to remember the decades worth of prospects who had similarly exciting AA numbers and turned out to be literally nothing upon their arrival to the MLB. Prentice Redmond, oh man, Fernando Martinez, Dilson Herrera, Gavin Cecchini, Kevin Plawecki, and even if Jet Williams ends up being as good as Ty Wigginton or Michael Conforto, that should be no reason to hold on to him when he can be traded for a position that the Mets need the most right now. Yeah, we've had a lot of prospects fail out, but the one you're forgetting that they just recently traded is Pete Crow Armstrong, who they could use. Eric writes, Evan and Pete, my disappointment with the Freddy Peralta trade isn't with Freddy Peralta. The Mets need to add at least one reliable elite starting pitcher, and Peralta is that. However, in the years since the Verlander and Scherzer trades, I looked forward to Drew Gilbert, Luis Angel Acuna, Brandon Sproat, and Jet Williams. If they weren't going to establish themselves with the next generation of Mets, then I at least expected them to be a part of pivotal trades. But Drew Gilbert was traded in the package for an underwhelming half-season rental of Tyler Rogers in a disastrous overall season. Okay. Acuna, who flashed so much promise in 2024, has been traded for the often injured and underperforming Luis Robert Jr. Sproat and Williams have been traded for a one-season rental of Freddy Peralta. I can't help but think that's all we got from our top prospects. For the years we looked forward to them, the return for them seems too little. Well, we have to go on a case-by-case basis. In the case of Acuna, as great as he was for a week, and let's keep in mind, that's what it was. It was a week filling in for Francisco Lindor in 2024. Even by watching him, not just what the scouts tell you, I don't think he's more than a super utility player. So, yeah, we were excited that Steve Cohen was willing to pay so much money of Max Scherzer's contract down that they were able to get a top prospect, and that was cool and all. I don't think we should make someone something he's not. So in the case of Acuna, I think most of us came to that conclusion. We all kind of agreed, like, hey, he's a nice piece off the bench, but I'd never felt he was going to become some kind of impact starter. He may have that chance now. We'll see. I mean, he's going to Chicago, and he's got a chance to make me eat my words and many others. I would not let the hope of that trade change things. I'll tell you a quick story. Do you guys remember when they traded Roberto Alomar? Not for Roberto Alomar. They traded him away. They traded him to the Chicago White Sox, and they got a relief pitcher back by the name of Royce Ring. And these were the days before, we're able to watch film or videos or highlights of these guys. And so I looked at Royce Ring's numbers. My dad looked at Royce Ring's numbers, and we're like, oh, there we go. There's our future closer. This is exciting. And we saw Royce Ring pitch, and as soon as he started throwing, we're like, this is soft toss and lefty. This is what they got. So you talk yourself into, oh, this is great. We got Royce Ring, man. This is going to be fantastic. But once you've established what the guy is, don't try to create him into something he's not. So in the case of Acuna, I'm not that disappointed. In the case of Gilbert, I said it at the time. I think a lot of us did. I was excited they got Tyler Rogers. I thought they gave up a lot. Jose Butto, as flawed as he was, felt like a lot. Drew Gilbert felt like a lot. Who was the other guy they gave up? They gave up the pitcher. I already forgot his name. He pitched last year for us briefly. It felt like a lot for a rental reliever. We'll see what those guys turn into. It may not turn into much. They're not top end prospects. But yes, in the moment, it felt like a lot. And it's not worth it because Tyler Rogers, while he wasn't bad, fell short in some big moments, but the team fell short. And then he left as a free agent. One of the pieces of Joel Sherman's reporting is that the Mets thought they were going to re-sign him. They thought they had him on a 3-year, 36, and then Toronto threw in like an option year or whatever, and he was gone. So that's why that deal feels like, wow, they gave up so much, and what did they truly get? In the case of Peralta, it is different, I think, than those two other cases because, Peralta is just better. Like, yes, Luis Robert Jr. they didn't give up a lot. We just went through Acuna. Hopefully he bounces back. It's a low-risk, high-reward deal. The Peralta deal is a high risk, but a higher reward because he can be a top-of-the-rotation arm. He did get Cy Young votes last season. So while they gave up more, I think it's an even higher reward. The big question around Freddy Peralta is going to be, can he go deeper into games? Because we went through it when we did the Rico upon the trade. It is a little, I don't want to say alarming. It's a little disappointing that he's basically a 5-inning pitcher, which is still a value to this team, and he's still really good. But was that the Brewers holding him back more than anything else? And if they're not going to extend him, and I don't think they are, I don't need the Mets to be restrictive. Not that we're being, dangerous with his arm, but I want him out there every 5 days. I want him being pushed past 105 and 110 pitches. Why not? He's the ace. He's also may not be here for more than a year. Kyle writes, the more I dig into Freddy Peralta, the more I get why people love the idea of him, but I'm not sure what he actually is in reality. He had 200-plus strikeouts and 150-plus innings in 3 straight years, which is impressive consistency. But his strikeout rate has dropped the last 2 seasons, while his walk rate has gone up. He had a really strong 2021 and then 3 down years, 22, 23, 24, and then bounced back again in 2025. So I'm stuck. The only seasons he's really looked like a legit top-of-the-rotation guy were 21 and 25. Is he the guy or just someone who flashes ace-level stuff without truly being one? And as such, is he worth what it would take to trade for him? And is he worth the years he'd ask for in free agency? I'd love to hear your take. So we'll go over it real quick. In 2021, the year you speak of, he made 27 starts. He pitched to a 2.80 ERA. He threw 144 innings. He was an all-star. The years, 2022, he missed part of the season, pitched reasonably well. I'll look at 23 and 24. He did have a high 3 ERA. He was striking out about 11 guys per 9. I would value a 3.86 ERA, 165 innings, a whip of about 1.1, 11 strikeouts per 9. I would value that, no, as not an ace, but still a pretty valuable piece of your rotation, more like a 2 or 3. And I think the same goes for 2024. So you call them down years. I would call them just non-ace years. But when you make 32 starts and you throw 170 innings, even if your ERA is 3.6, again, it's not ace, but it's solid 2.3 stuff, which there's a huge value in. Last year, obviously, it jumps down a run to 2.7. You mentioned it. His strikeout numbers and walk numbers were exactly the same. Exactly the same. He gave up a lot fewer hits last year and subsequently gave up the fewer runs. That's why his ERA dropped almost a full run. So if we're evaluating his last 3 years, the 3 years in which he's made every start, I'd say, yeah, in 23 and 24, he was more of a 2 or a third starter. And last year, he was an ace. What is he this year? Well, I'm hoping he builds off last year. When you look at A, this is the prime of his career. B, this is a free agent year. Can this be the best season of his career? I hope so. I evaluate him and feel better about this upcoming season with him than I would have with Framber Valdez. Because I think Peralta, if you look at a career as a mountain and it's climbing up and then eventually you go down that mountain, I think he's at the very top, or at least he's approaching the very top. Unfortunately, a guy like Framber Valdez, he's had a wonderful career, but he's probably on the other side of the top of the mountain. Anyhow, we appreciate all the emails. We've got many, many more that I will go through over the next few days and weeks, talking about a variety of other topics around this team. You could always email us, the ricob@gmail.com, the ricob@gmail.com. I have promised this for the last few weeks, but there's been so much Met news we haven't gotten to it. And that is, A, putting a bow on the Edwin Diaz trade and where that ranks in Mets history now that the trade has been completed. And also talking about all the painful losses in free agency that we've endured as Met fans over the years. And we're going to exclude Alonso and Diaz. It's really to look at history and then determining where and how would be the fair way to determine where Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz fit on that list. So that's all coming up in the next week or two. Again, subscribe to the WFAN YouTube page, and you can always watch your Rico Brognas live because we do them live, or you can download the Rico Brogna wherever you download your podcasts. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Stay safe in the snow, and thank you for listening to Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.